Welcome to the Authentic Cinema Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Barron. I am joined, as always, by the extraordinary Bob Lyren. And today we are going to be talking about Denis Villeneuve's 2015 film, Sicario. Bob, this was your selection.
Yeah.
Excellent choice. Why did you choose this film?
Denis Villeneuve is one of the most important directors in Hollywood. Where Hollywood is at, there's not a lot of auteur-driven directors that are given the kind of budgets that are associated with Hollywood films, or given like studio IP like Dune. Those projects cost so much money, and they want the four quadrants. They want something that's going to appeal to everyone.
Yeah.
That idea of using images to evoke feelings and tell a story has gotten lost in this watered down version of mass appeal cinema.
Can originality exist in the studio system anymore?
Right. So when you have a director like Villeneuve who comes in and gets the same budgets as a Marvel film and gets to tell these authentic, original stories, he also is one of our most visually compelling directors. He uses the camera to help tell a story. And that is such a diminishing currency now. There are fewer and fewer directors like Christopher Nolan or Alfonso Cuarón or Denis Villeneuve who really have that auteur sensibility that are given these massive projects. It's an interesting exercise, I think, to find a director like Villeneuve who started out as like an independent director and then slowly graduated to bigger and bigger projects. And, you know, there's a certain responsibility that comes when you're taking on the Dune franchise or doing Blade Runner 2049. And when you think about those types of movies, and, you know, particularly now, even like we can include the streamers in that conversation about studios, they want formal control. They want thematic control. They want pacing control. Those aspects are rarely controlled by the director, unless you're one of a very few, and Villeneuve is one of those guys. And then we can kind of look at this film and sort of see how that begins.
Yeah, he's a guy that's been allowed to be a little bit let off the leash when they don't let people off the leash anymore.
Right.
In this data-driven, ultra-corporate studio system now where everything can be measured down to the finest data points. He managed to create something within the studio framework that is urgent, edgy, and remarkable. I think it's interesting if we think about franchises. This is Taylor Sheridan's first film.
Right.
This was his first script. They shot this off the first draft of his first script. He's a mogul now.
He's a brand, yeah.
I think he's obviously as big of a voice in this film. Both these guys would go on to create some of the biggest films of the 2020s of our era now.
Right. You could look at Sicario as kind of a jumping off point for a very unique career that follows. So it'll be interesting to get into this film and then kind of break it down. There's so much to talk about.
Are you ready to go into the underworld, Bob? Are you ready to go there?
I'm ready to go into the tunnel. Let's do it.
Let's go into the tunnel. Let's go.
Flip on my night vision.
Bob has night vision. I have thermal. Really, I wanted to start and frame the conversation by talking about the opening scene of the film.
Yeah, okay.
I think a great opening scene kind of tells you the whole movie.
Right.
It's going to introduce the themes of the film. And the thing that stuck out to me is the sequence where they burst into the house in the armored vehicle, and Emily Blunt, Kate Mercer, walks into a room, and there's a guy waiting with a shotgun, and he blasts. She falls down. He blows a hole in the drywall behind her, and then she kills the guy. And then her partner comes in to check on her to make sure if she's okay. And he notices the hole in the wall, and he notices something in the hole in the wall, and he peels back the drywall, and we see that there are putrefied dead bodies in plastic bags hidden in the walls.
Yeah.
But the drywall is such a brilliant metaphor for law and order, for actually how fragile, how thin, and how cosmetic like our laws and our beliefs and our values ultimately are.
Right.
It's a great illustration of this theory by a psychoanalyst named Jacques Lacan of how what Lacan calls the real breaks through the symbolic and what he calls the imaginary realms. And Jacques Lacan said that the human psyche has like three fundamental structures. The symbolic realm is the realm of language, of order, of laws, of policies. It's how we literally order our reality. The imaginary is our values, our beliefs, our identity, essentially the story we tell ourselves about ourselves. And then the real is ineffable. It's outside of language. It's that which cannot be captured by the symbolic or the imaginary. And the real is most commonly experienced as trauma, as a violent trauma that cracks through the symbolic realm and the imaginary realm.
Right.
That's why trauma is so devastating, is because it actually shatters your identity. It shatters the story that you're telling yourself about yourself. And then it also shows you that the laws of the world, the way things are ordered, it destroys that as well. Back to this opening scene. I love the drywall because it really illustrates how the symbolic and the imaginary, how fragile those sort of layers of our reality are for us. How structures like laws, borders, walls, even our identities are symbolic, they're imaginary, but it shows us right away they're not real.
Right.
It shows us that this violence that we're trying to keep out of our society, it's all around us all the time, and it's hidden. These structures, what they're there for is to hide the violence, to make it so that we don't see it.
Right.
Also, the trapdoor is such a great image of the real breaking through and an entryway into the underworld opening up.
We do build these walls and we build this perception of everything's cool. It's safe. I think it's fascinating that the opening scene takes place in a really like suburban neighborhood of the United States in Arizona. And like, it's not as picturesque and quaint as you think. Behind these very fragile drywall boards, there's just like horror waiting for you. This confrontation with the real, it's right there, just beneath the surface. And we like just to go about our day believing everything's okay. And all it takes is like one little wrong turn. And all of a sudden you're just like faced with unimaginable atrocities.
Sheridan's inverting the Western myth, right? So Westerns, typically the classic 1950s Westerns, they're always about the establishment of law and order out of chaos. And what Sheridan and Villeneuve are doing in this film is they're inverting that. They're flipping it. They're actually showing us the shattering of the myth. There is no, in any ultimate sense, law and order. This horror and this violence that we believe has been pushed out beyond our walls, beyond us. No. Not only is it not pushed out beyond the walls, it's actually what's holding up your society. It's the thing that's actually holding up your house.
The scary thing about this film is there is no control. It is shattering that myth, but what this film is about, and it's told through the three main characters, is how we perceive and manage and try to control this chaos. You can't. Yeah. No one gets out alive. The more I watch this film, the scarier this movie gets. This is like a horror film. It's scaring the shit out of me. The first time you watch, you're like, oh, this is a really cool movie. Like badass characters doing badass stuff. And then the more you start to dissect it, you're like, this is really ugly. And there's a really dark message. And it's that this system that we're talking about, this system of control, it only works because the three main characters do not share, there's no moral overlap between these three characters of this movie. So for our system to work, you basically have to have these very different moralities kind of coexisting, but never acknowledging each other in order to play this game.
Right.
It's really scary to think that like what Kate Mercer kind of represents, what Matt Graver represents, Josh Brolin's character, and what Alejandro's character represents is like three completely different moralities that they're physically occupying the same space, but they couldn't be further from each other. And they're all codependent on one another to make this controlled chaos even work.
If you think about this Lacanian framework that I'm talking about, the symbolic is represented by Josh Brolin, Matt Graver, the state, order. Kate represents the imaginary, the beliefs, the need to believe, the need to have an identity. And I would say the real is represented by Alejandro, the Sicario. The psyche is constructed by all three of these things. This is all building the house. This is what builds our system. You brought up again that when you watch this film, and it's something I wanted to mention too, we have an example here of a film that blends genres. You could see this film as a Western, you could see it as a crime thriller, but you can also see this film as a horror film. And if I had to pick one genre, I would actually say it's a work of cosmic horror.
Right.
And it's because the inverted Western will always be a work of cosmic horror, because cosmic horror stories are always about eternal indifferent forces beyond law, beyond morality, beyond language, breaking through and shattering reality. And some of the imagery in the film is right out of a Fangoria magazine from the 1980s. These putrefied bodies in these plastic bags in the beginning. You have the bodies being hung over the overpasses in Juarez with their heads cut off, mutilated. I notice when we see these images, it's very difficult to like understand exactly what you're looking at because your mind can't capture it with language. It can't capture the full horror or understanding. All of this horror also raises the stakes of the film. It makes the film so dangerous. You know that there are no limits to the violence and horror that can happen here. I wanted to talk about how Kate is our guide.
Yeah. When I think about the film, I think it's like three characters as one system. Kate, Matt, and Alejandro each represent a different component of a single strategic system. This film is really about how this system can just completely destroy, and I mean that in the most serious way, any moral fabric you have about living. And Kate, she's destroyed through the process of this film. But that's a necessary component for this fucked up system that we have to try to control chaos.
Yeah.
Sheridan and Villeneuve understood that in order to really hit home these themes is to frame it in the eyes of the most moral character we have.
Yeah.
The way that the movie is filmed, Kate is always the outsider. We see the film through her perspective, but whenever you see her framed, she's always kind of framed as people looking at her. She's always kind of witnessing what's going on. Many times in the film, she's often asking Matt and Alejandro, like, what is going on? Who are you? Who is that?
Yeah.
Why are we going here? And they keep her in the dark. She's there to bear witness.
Throughout the entire film, right? She's constantly just trying to find out like why she's there. When the real punches through the symbolic and it punches through the imaginary, it shatters your identity. And that's exactly what happens to Kate. Her identity, which was as a FBI agent who specializes in kidnapping, is erased. And then she's put on this mysterious, nebulous team. All she's told is that she'll have a chance to go after the people that are ultimately responsible for what happened.
Right.
That's all she knows. So she spends the whole film trying to figure out what her identity is supposed to be. What do I mean? Why am I here? And there's that great line, because she's also trying to figure out why Alejandro's there, right? And he says to her, nothing you're going to see will make sense to your American ears. She is not there to participate. She's there to witness.
To learn. That's what Matt keeps saying to her. Just learn. Soak it up. If he tells you to do something, do it.
She has this desire to go and see the source, to go all the way to the origin of the thing that shattered her identity and her beliefs.
Right.
And it's funny because we say this like in this sort of grand thematic way. Oh, she's there to witness. But literally within the sort of the banal bureaucratic structure of why she's there, we do find out that she's literally there just to witness so that Graver, the CIA, can operate internally inside the United States.
They need authorization.
It's realistic and yet also operating on a mythological level at the same time.
Yeah. Back to Kate. She's often filmed from behind. And that kind of puts her at the center of the story for the viewer because we're watching.
Yeah.
That scene that you brought up when she volunteers to be a part of the task force, the framing is so important. If you look at the way the shot is framed, the camera's behind her looking at her head. And on the left side of the frame is all of the institutional law enforcement members, like the task force leader. There's a guy from the FBI there. There's a guy from Arizona State Police. They're all sitting on the left side of her, and on the right side is Matt Graver.
Yes.
And so she has to make a choice. Which one are you going to go with?
Right.
Oftentimes in this film, Kate's reflected a lot in mirrors, and oftentimes her image is obscured. Like the steam in the shower after she washes all the blood off of her and she's standing in the bathroom looking at the mirror and the image of her is blocked by the steam. Like that's not an accident. Okay, Villeneuve's doing that on purpose. He's telling us that this character is entering into a moral gray zone where she doesn't know what's going on.
She doesn't see herself anymore.
Exactly. The camera language places Kate in a position of partial visibility and total incomplete understanding. And that's why I picked the film, is because I love films that use a visual language to help reinforce themes and ideas. And a film like Sicario is just so rich with them.
That's what I would say is real filmmaking. That's supposed to be the point of filmmaking.
Yeah, hey, just for our younger listeners, just so you know, you can use images to tell the story.
Yeah. It's incredible that this is unique now.
You know why this film is authentic?
Yeah. I love what you're saying because all these examples you're showing reinforces this idea of her losing her identity.
Right, exactly.
The mirror idea is brilliant. She doesn't recognize herself. And then you said something that I would also like to bring up. You said she's about to enter this moral gray zone.
Right.
To me, the biggest theme of the film is liminality. The film exists entirely in between spaces. We're on the border between the United States and Mexico. So we have the literal geographic borders and nation borders. If you think about the bridge scene and the tunnel scene, these are happening in liminal spaces between these nation states. But also the film operates in ethical liminality, even bureaucratic. She's going on this interagency team. It's not the FBI, it's not the CIA, it's not the Colombian cartel. We're operating in between legal frameworks. We're operating in between psychological spaces, emotional spaces, relational spaces, between good and evil, between friend and enemy, state, cartel, between legal, illegal, assassin, savior, lover, murderer. We're always in between. We have no firm ground to stand on. It's a film all about being in these liminal states.
Right.
Alejandro is like the ultimate liminal figure. She spends the first at least half of the film trying to just figure out like who this guy is. Who is he? He was a prosecutor, but is he CIA? Is he foreign? Is he from Mexico? Is he from Colombia? He's very mysterious. The assassin as a liminal figure between life and death.
Between worlds.
Someone that travels in between both. He's a ghost.
Right.
We find out that Alejandro was at one point a prosecutor working in Mexico. So again, he was like working within the law. He was in the symbolic, but the cartel murdered his wife and his daughter. And symbolically, he died. His identity was shattered. He becomes the opposite of the law. He becomes an assassin, the ultimate liminal figure. But the film's like biggest revelation is that there are no borders, no inside or outside. This is the horror of the film. It's all one thing. Kate discovers that the origin of the violence, it's within. Good and evil coexist dynamically. They're managed. We set up these really fucked up systems to try and control this thing. We can never eradicate it, though. We can never get rid of it. It can never be resolved. Order is symbolic. Borders, laws, and policies don't eradicate violence. They hide it.
Morality is not absolute. It's ebbs and flows, and the border as a moral threshold. Like you said, borders don't exist. They're things that we construct to try to create order.
Yes.
What happens when the chaos starts to overrun, literally and figuratively, our border? Well, we have to create these systems to try to control it, to try to fix it. And what we found is that in order to create an effective system, we have to have different levels of morality that coexist together and use one another, but they can't ever interact. And so that's why the film is almost like a horror film, because when you start examining and going deeper down into the tunnel, things just get destroyed.
Yeah.
Things like morality.
Right.
There's that moment when things pop off and Kate says, "What the fuck are we doing? We're murdering people at the border. We're getting into gunfights." She's law enforcement. This is like paramilitary kind of operations. And so if you think about how the border can represent an entry into a space where like legal and moral constraints, they start becoming much more and more ambiguous.
It's impossible to see where you are. Your identity is just dissolved into this. There's that great shot, Bob, where the commandos, the Delta Force guys, there's like a line of the horizon line with the mountains in the background. They just disappear into the darkness.
They sink into the darkness.
Into the depths. Yeah.
The visual language, he's telling you something. That shot wasn't an accident.
And then also the night vision and the thermal camera view, the first person view.
Right. You can't see the horror of this system operating. You can't see it with the naked eye. You need a filter.
Exactly. It's also an image of the inverted world.
Right.
It creates this opposite world that they literally walk into.
Yeah, that's great.
And that's why I think this film is about descending into the underworld. The katabasis, it's an ancient Greek myth about a living person crosses over into the realm of death, and they return, but they return forever marked. The film is being told from the point of view of Kate, and she leads us down into the tunnel, and then it passes off onto Alejandro. So we leave Kate behind and then follow Alejandro from that point.
Right.
And Taylor Sheridan said that it totally breaks the rules of screenwriting. You're not supposed to do that. And he said, I don't know. I just wrote it. I wasn't thinking about it, but it works. I remembered him talking about that, and I thought about it, and I was like, of course. Kate can only go as far into the underworld as the law will let her go.
The institutional morality, right.
And her belief in the law will let her go. That's important to say.
Right.
But Alejandro, because he's a ghost, because he's this liminal figure, right? He can go beyond where the law and the belief in the law goes. And so Kate leads us down right to that point. But after that, we as the audience, if we want to go all the way, we're going to have to leave Kate behind and go with Alejandro to the end.
Sure. For the character of Matt, I think he represents the institution itself.
He's order. He's the guy that is trying to establish order.
Yeah.
Control.
Yeah.
He's the state, which is weird, right? Because he doesn't have to operate within the rules. He just has to maintain and establish the rules. He doesn't even have to believe in them. He just is order.
But in order for him to do that, he needs Kate, both literally, so he has the permission to run his operation.
He needs the belief in order.
Correct.
And Kate is the belief in the order.
Exactly.
He needs someone to believe in the order that he is establishing.
But on the flip side, he needs Alejandro because Alejandro now represents pure violence enforcement.
Yeah.
When we need to go beyond the limits of the law, beyond the limits of what is considered appropriate or morally sound, we call Alejandro.
He's my bird dog.
Yeah. My favorite line of the movie is when Kate is trying to get a handle on Alejandro and she's like, what are we going to see down there? And he's like, that's like asking me how a watch works. For now, let's just keep an eye on the time.
Yeah.
It hits hard the more you watch this film.
It's so good.
But anyway, Alejandro represents the crossover into the unknown.
The underworld.
Yeah, the underworld.
Alejandro is the reality of order. The violence, the actual cost and reality of order. What enables the other two things to exist, to establish themselves. You have to have this violence. I think it's really fascinating. What is at the end of this tunnel? What do we find at the end of the tunnel? We arrive not in some kind of villain's underground lair in the bottom of a volcano. We land at a family dinner table, at a scene of domestic bliss, a father, a mother, and the two kids eating dinner together. And when Alejandro sits down at the table, he's got the gun on him. They're obviously all scared. But Fausto, he's the number 3 in the organization, Fausto Alarcon. Here we are. We're at the dinner table with him. And by the way, the name Fausto, it's a reference from Goethe's story, Faust. It's about a man who sells his soul to the devil in exchange for ultimate knowledge. Okay, so not a mistake that his name's Fausto. Okay. And Fausto says to Alejandro, where do you think we learned all of this? And he's referencing, of course, the Colombian cartels taught the Mexican cartels basically everything they knew. But he's also talking about the United States.
Right.
He's saying this domestic bliss we've arrived at the end of our journey, we're just sitting at a dinner table with a family, just like in the United States, is all propped up by like this horrific exploitation and violence. It's the same thing. The tunnel mirrors itself on either side of the tunnel. And that's the horror of the film, the cosmic revelatory horror. That's what the thin drywall of our legal system and our borders and our walls is covering up. That basically this domestic bliss, it's all built on violence and horror. That's what holds up the world.
For Matt, he represents, as you said, like the state power. The violence for him is like an administrative tool. Alejandro is like a tool that we're going to unleash to accomplish violence that we as the state, we can't own that.
We can't incorporate that.
It's just like Kate is a tool for the state. We need someone from a domestic team to be here to sign off and sign her signature. Alejandro operates outside of any legal or institutional framework that we would be comfortable with.
He needs to be deniable too, right?
Exactly. What we learn is that Alejandro's personal vengeance aligns with the state's goals.
Yeah.
And that's why he's used as a tool.
Kate and Graver have a confrontation outside the tunnel when she comes back out. And she asks him, like, who is he working for? And Graver says, anybody that will allow him to get to the people that killed his family. Anybody that will point him in the direction of what he's looking for, he'll work for them. He's liminal. He doesn't work anywhere.
We have like morality, the state, and violence. 3 components of a system.
Yeah. I would say that order presents the illusion that there is a morality.
Yeah.
Basically, what the film is saying, there is no external origin of morality. Order establishes a sort of agreed upon morality, but in an ultimate sense, morality is actually internal. It lives internally inside the person.
This film is very much about how do modern institutions, how does the state maintain legitimacy and control, but they have to go and operate totally outside any like moral boundary. You need people like Alejandro and Matt Graver who are going to know how to bend and manipulate the system in order to put people like Alejandro in place to do things that we don't want to know about.
That are hidden from us.
Yes.
What's hidden from us is like there is actually no morality. It's an illusion. The only moral compass you have is inside yourself. That's why this movie is a journey into the soul, into the underworld. The horror that we realize at the end of the film is that that system to control the violence actually generates the violence. It's this loop. That's why when we meet Fausto at the dinner table, we realize we're looking at ourselves. It's a mirror image.
I want to discuss the last scene between Kate and Alejandro. With Kate standing on the balcony, she thinks she hears something back in her apartment and she turns around and the camera, now we're in the inside of the apartment looking out in the balcony and she's totally obscured by the curtain and she's just like a shadow. And Alejandro says something like, I wouldn't stand on balconies for a while if I were you, Kate. So then she comes in and obviously we have like just one of the best scenes of the film. And I wanted to kind of get your take on what you think's going on there and thematically what spoke to you about it.
It's this idea that everybody that descends into the underworld has to leave something behind. She does not want to sign this document. She understands that she's compromising her soul, everything she believes in. One of the big things about Kate is she's always about telling the truth. At the beginning, when the house explodes and there's a guy that comes over and he's like, hey, the U.S. attorney wants a statement on this. What should I tell him? And she says, the truth.
Right.
She's asked by her partner, did you do this by the book? She's like, yes, of course. At the end of the film, she has to lie. And if she doesn't tell a lie, she dies. And that's the cost of what going into the land of the dead, the place you're not really supposed to go, the place that is hidden from you, and it's hidden from you for a reason. If you see that, a part of you will die. The person that believed in this rule of law, that believed that you were doing something good, you believed that you worked for a good organization, all of that has to die now. And it's extracted by her guide, by Alejandro.
It could also be said that's the cost for the system to operate.
Yeah.
This system that we have trying to control our border, to fight this unwinnable situation. It's like a cancer.
It just eats itself.
Yeah.
He tells her at the end, remember? He says to her, you know, you should move to a small town now, somewhere where they still believe in the rule of law.
Right.
Because you won't survive here. This is the land of wolves, and you're not a wolf.
Right.
He disassembles her gun and throws it on the table. At the end of the film, she walks out on the balcony with the gun and aims it at him. What is that saying? And remember, he told her in the tunnel, never point a weapon at me again.
Right.
First of all, no, of course she can't move to a small town where they believe in the rule of law. That's not going to do anything for her.
Anymore.
She's not,
Right.
She can't be that. Yeah, she woke up from that dream. So that's over.
Yeah, it's been
right?
destroyed.
And I think it was her way of saying she can aim the gun at him now because now they're the same thing. And then he acknowledges her and then walks away.
I interpreted it a little bit differently. And what I thought was her pointing the gun at him is her last stand to try to maintain some belief in the institutional law and order, and by extension, like hold on to a little bit of her morality. When he turns and makes himself a target, she can't summon the courage to shoot him. And so is she completely destroyed? I would say no. I think that that's why she's not able to shoot him.
Because she still has a morality.
She's just holding on just enough, that belief
That's interesting because that goes back to this katabasis idea. You don't die completely, otherwise you would stay in the underworld.
Right.
You just have to leave a piece of you, though. A part of you has to stay. The thing that you see in the underworld kills the part of you that needs to die. And you have to leave that behind.
That's interesting.
But it's not everything. She will not just murder somebody.
I think that if she had shot him, then yes, now she is a wolf.
Yeah, and she doesn't want to become that.
Yeah.
When I saw this film in 2015, it didn't have a very big impact on me for some reason. And yet this time I watched it, it was an absolute gut punch. And I think it's because this film was prophetic in a way that I couldn't understand in 2015. But if you look at the world we live in now, that drywall, it's being cracked. We're seeing our beliefs and our system are so fragile, more cosmetic now than actually functional.
You know, I told you I've watched Sicario maybe like once a year, and I always kind of I see new things, I have different experiences, and this time, this movie's like starting to scare the hell out of me. It's almost like a horror film. And I think that this is what makes authentic films just so enjoyable, is that there's so much there. You can watch it 15 times and every time you can go deeper.
I always love a journey into the soul kind of movie. This idea of going down to the source and then the realization that you are the source.
Yeah.
Thank you for choosing this film and meeting with me.
Yeah, man, we made it through the tunnel. We're out the other side.
I'm going to move to a small town where people still believe in the rule of law.
Yeah.
Everyone, thank you for listening. Please let us know what you think about Sicario. Do you have an interesting take? Please like and subscribe. It helps us make the podcast. Bob, take care of yourself.
Thanks, man. Have a good one.